Hello and welcome back for another episode of Growing Joshua Trees from Seeds. It's been 9.05 years or day 3307. So this is 2024 May. And 3 years ago I moved into this place, and I think in 2021 that's when I saw a big growth spurt for my Joshua tree being exposed to full sun. So I had transplanted it into one of those tall pots, and that's why it's not buried lower, just like the ice cream being in the background. So you can perfectly see the root ball, even though most of the cocoa coir for the ice cream bean has washed away, it's in that shape. So I had to cut away the pots that these two plants were in and do transplants into the much better pots. And if you follow my avocado series, the latest one from germinating avocado pits and hydrogen peroxide, what you can see is that, well, you can't see it in the background here because other things were going on. That series hadn't even started, but later on in 2024, I published that series. And the seedling that's growing in the small pot, it's much more stunted than its counterpart growing in one of these big square planters, $100 planters that have internal water reservoir. So that'll allow for the tap roots, the roots to go deep. And of course, I bet everything is root ball bound, pot bound at this point for the Joshua tree, and definitely for the ice cream bean. So I'm spraying some really old Bayer Bio Advance there. I have doubts about its efficacy. This thing has never suffered mites anyway, but not that I can tell. But it has scale insect infestations. Has had them pretty bad in the past. And here you can see me doing some trimming. And I just like a more clean shaven look. I don't like to have these blades in the way, especially when I'm getting close and trying to do work near the base of the trunk, whether it's fertilizing or shoring up the cocoa coir to the base, so the roots that are emanating from higher up, in the root ball, that they don't dry out. So that's a constant problem. And like I said, this thing doesn't have a root ball that was so advanced that completely fit the shape of the pot. But the Joshua tree tends to have roots that go deep, contrary to everything that's kind of said, out there about the Joshua tree roots being shallow. But it's all relative, right? As one of my viewers pointed out in the previous episode, I think, or maybe the one before. Maybe it's all a relative term. Maybe they mean the roots are all emanating out in a disc, a shallow disc that's 3 feet deep, a meter deep, something like that. Maybe it doesn't necessarily imply that what all the the botanists, people who study this, are saying, that the roots are just a few centimeters, a few inches right below the surface. Certainly when I walk out there in Joshua tree territory in the high desert, I don't see roots getting exposed. But this plant's interesting. It has very beautiful roots, as I'll show you once again later on. And it seems to have a big root burrow, like many other plants out here. Manzanita has, in the chaparral, it has like root burrows. And Manzanita has that same beautiful color that the roots of the Joshua tree do. So you never really see the roots of the Joshua trees in the wild. But yeah, that's one advantage my series gives you over, just walking out there, Joshua Tree National Park, the SEMA Dome. I think they have these in Utah, in Arizona, Western Arizona as well. So if you walk out in those habitats, you see all these old trees in their glory and all their different shapes. But you'll never see the root system like you can in this series and get to examine things up close. for this extended duration of time. So yeah, cutting away these needles, it's something that I quite enjoy actually. It's like kind of like a spring cleaning or kind of a housekeeping activity, and it just gets all those things out of the way. And yeah, this thing got quite a bit taller since 2021, since I moved here, and got full sun exposure for all my plants. So I think what happened was there was a growth spurt early on, and that resulted from that. And then what we're seeing now with a lot of blades, leaves dying off in 2024, and me trimming them away is basically a result of that. So the tree's getting taller, and the leaves have a finite cycle or lifespan, which I think makes a lot of sense, because if you go out there, it's like, yeah, you do see some, if you even want to call them saplings, that are tall and columnar. They might be as tall as you, and there's just like a thick, just several feet of blades basically going straight up, and the trunk is really thick. I know this trunk kind of looks weird because it's so thin. This is very thin compared to a wild Joshua tree, and I wouldn't just say it's the eastern species or whatever in Nevada or whatever, but I think it's just because I've raised this on balconies in very limited weak sunlight for the first few years of its life. But that said, I mean, it's been 3 years in full sun, and this thing's gotten taller, but it hasn't really become thick, like a support column of building type appearance and thickness, and with the girth that you see in wild trees. In fact, for the wild trees, even when they're tiny, they become quite thick and girthy. So this is a little bit of an anomaly. If it were to be the natural world, you wouldn't see something like this. And I only wish I had discovered these, cubic pots with internal water reservoirs earlier, and just transplanted into that, because now it's like whenever I water, the roots get exposed, as I'll show you later in this series. But yeah, I've been spraying pesticide, as you can see from some of the captions that have floated by earlier in this video, and every once in a while. This thing is very, very hardy, and yeah, the scale insects have been kept to a minimum. But what I was saying earlier is just like you could see the scale insects here. There's still a few of them, which is kind of annoying, and it's really hard to tell how old those are. I mean, but it seems like some of these could be alive. So I used to spend a lot of time scraping these off with a floss pick. That's like perfect for scraping off those insects. And this was from June, a month later. And you can see all these little weeds germinating. That's actually the result of me mixing in all these flower seeds, because I had, well, this is after I fertilized, but I was trying to grow a ground cover to prevent erosion. And it got to be really messy, because the flowers, which they're not weeds, I mean, they're just native flowers mostly to California. They started growing too much foliage and growing too fast, and then the whole thing was kind of a leafy mess. And then I decided to just pull everything. But you can see here there's still like hundreds and hundreds of seeds trying to germinate constantly. And even if I didn't do this, there'd be weeds growing basically constantly in all the pots. So spraying more of this Bayer Bio Advanced. It's 9.2 years. So yeah, like what was I saying earlier? It's basically the leaves have a finite lifespan, and it's true that you see kind of the ones that look like giant thick spike clubs out there that haven't branched yet. But when you look at the older trees, what you'll see is a ball of spiky blades like this, basically. at the end of each branch. You'll see this, but the blades will be a lot thicker, and the stems, the trunks, will be a lot thicker as well. So that's basically what you see, and it kind of jives with what I've been saying. It's just, I think there was a growth spurt in 2021 due to full sun, and then, fertilize, better nutrients, better habitat in general. So yeah, I think it's going to start converging with what it's, what they look like in the wild at some point, but it's a very slow process. And I imagine it would take years for the trunk to thicken up. So this blade being half dead, it kind of concerned me, along with the loss of all of the earlier blades. You can see all the fresh trimmings on the bottom. So yeah, the top, I don't know, 3 inches maybe, top few centimeters of the stem there that's exposed. That used to all be blades, and I thought, wow, this is nice. It's just going to be like one of those younger ones in the wild, like a thick spiked club essentially. But yeah, the blades don't last forever. It seems like about, maybe it's about 3 years. They go through their life cycle and then they just die off. And then in nature, there's no one to trim them, right? So they just drop downwards and basically form sort of a beard. But I think as enough time passes by, they do get shed. So they're not going to stay on there forever anyway, as you can see from the wild trees. So other than this being thin and the blades being thin, I think, overall it's still in good health. I mean, the worry was basically from every transplant that I do, such as from the tall pots. You can see in the right hand side there, one of those pots that I still haven't thrown away. Those are suboptimal, as we later found out in the latter half of 2024 avocado pit germination series. So yeah, this is Spectracide Immunox multi-purpose fungicide. I thought that fungicide would be critical, not just pesticide, for getting rid of mites and aphids. Certainly those have been a big problem since I moved here, and snails. But there's other considerations. The fruit trees, they almost always have like fungal infections, and they start dying and losing a lot of leaves. So I put a test amount in a spray bottle. And in some of my other videos in 2024, you can see footage of me testing out this Immunox on all the unwanted weeds and plants in my front yard that you can see in the background there. And I determined that this was not causing any leaf burning. So I think it's just prudent to test out new pesticides, fungicides like this before you go spraying everything. So this is August, the heat of summer, hottest month in San Diego. You can see after I do a lot of watering, the roots get exposed, and you can see they're a beautiful reddish color. So I can never get over this, but it's just amazing how the top of the plant, everything is so tough and bladed and dry looking, and then down here, whenever the roots get exposed, you can see they're beautiful. Their colorations, just like the reddish bark of manzanita. So yeah, you can see here I'm flushing my pots to get rid of all the excess Epsom salt, because I think I was salting the earth literally for a lot of my pots, and it was starting to affect growth. So it wasn't just me investigating the use of new fungicides. Later on in 2024, it was also seeing if I was over-salting my pots with too much fertilizer, too much Epsom salt. So I would say it seemed like the Epsom salt did some good, but it might be prudent also to do a flush every once in a while, just to give yourself a reset. But having said all of that, though, it does seem like every time I water fertilizer or not, well, the Joshua tree is perfectly fine, but for a lot of the other plants that are more vulnerable, like tropical fruit trees, they do not seem to do well after watering. It's almost like there's an explosion of fungal growth. So that's why I wanted to test the spectricide Immunox on all my plants. I knew in all likelihood the Joshua tree wasn't going to suffer any damage from practically anything, no matter what. Um, I mean, I had a little bit of worry in 2024 that the transplant may have negatively affected this, but I didn't cut the root ball, which I think is a mistake people commonly make when they sell these things. Some people harvest Joshua trees from the wild, I believe, and then they try to sell them online. And people who buy them, sometimes they'll write in and tell me, it's like, well, I buy these things, they're usually 3 years old or whatever, and then they just die after a few months. And it seems like in almost every case, it's because they don't cut enough of the root ball away. And based on what I know from my own Joshua tree grown from seed, the roots run deep, like almost right away. So, you probably have people out there, vendors. I don't know if they try to grow these things on farms or they just like poaching them or whatever, but they're probably only digging, like 1 foot deep, 18 inches, probably not even 2 feet. And then they're just cutting it off in kind of a cylinder. And they're just like assuming, okay, well, you got a functioning root ball, you got enough of the roots, you're good to go. I'm going to slap this in a potting mix in a pot, which is also bad too for roots that are vulnerable. In the beginning of the series, this was the only seedling that survived the root rot when I was using potting mix infested with all sorts of pests. So yeah, there wasn't a spider mite problem because I don't think they'd be able to prey on such tough leaves anyway. But root rot was a problem. So I think it's two things. They probably try to use some kind of succulent potting mix or just generic potting mix, rotting wood chips, full of fungus, probably not the right kinds that normally associate with root systems out in the wild. And then, it's just like wet potting mix that has a lot of fast rate of decay, so the microbes use up all the oxygen in the potting mix, and then that suffocates the roots. And plus, the people who sell these have essentially killed them by cutting the roots too shallow and creating all these wounds. And it basically takes a long time for the Joshua tree to recover, if at all. So it seems like people buy these and then they die, buy them and die. So, yeah, so I added some Physin 20, which is supposedly a powerful antiseptic, but it's supposed to kill viruses, bacteria, fungi. And I just added that to the kind of, at this point, rancid smelling, or slightly more rancid smelling mix of I have Bayer Bio Advanced and Spectricide Immunox. So now it has Physin 22. I have some leftover mix, and I sprayed all my plants except for the ice cream bean because I was eating from that. And yeah, I used that for a while. Then I'm like, well, I'll just go pour the rest out in some unwanted dirt and then make a new mix next time. So this is later in 2024 when it got cold, but you can see the Joshua tree is just chugging along. I mean, it looks pretty neat. There's maybe only one blade that needed to be trimmed there. Well, kind of a few here. So it's a continual process. And my fears of just massive die-off of blades, leaves, from potentially complications of the last transplant are pretty much gone. I do believe that this current system isn't ideal for erosion in terms of the cocoa coir that's hugging the root burl on its highest point, but it does provide the increased elevation for better aeration and drainage. Not that I necessarily think those are important factors. Once this got past the tiny seedling phase early on in the series, it seemed like in the middle years, no amount of watering could harm this. And I kind of think that's the case. They used to sell these awesome planters, the beige ones that I had over a decade ago. And I don't have any with me anymore, but they stopped selling those pots, the self-watering pots with the big lips and generous watering trays. I really think the public would have continued benefiting from those. And then nowadays, all you see when you go to these big box stores are just like crappy pots. And you don't see a lot of the self-watering pots. This one is like essentially a giant self-watering pot in terms of having a big reservoir at the bottom. So it's like 20 inches or 50 centimeters. That's the internal width and length of the dimensions, and I think it's about as much as deep too. So yeah, like if I don't water this gently, or in this case I'm fertilizing, since you can see me using the green watering can. If I don't do this, and even if I do use this gentle showering can, it's like you can see there's erosion. It's just like the cocoa coir, it doesn't really have any adhesive force. It just like runs off, which is annoying. Then I gotta, put on a glove or something and manually shore up all the roots, and then move it all back up, and then that prevents drying out. So anyway, I know this isn't a super exciting episode. I haven't visited any wild Joshua trees lately, but thanks for watching, and stay tuned for further updates.